My story starts in the snow in Pasadena in 1949 with my great uncle, who was developmentally disabled. They said he was disabled, so he didn't get any education. There was no opportunity for housing for him. There was no support system out there for him. At that time, there was no Medicaid. So it was, every family was an island.
There wasn't all that much known, and routinely families were just advised, this is a child that's never going to be anything. Put him away. You know, get him out of your family and don't become too attached.
The parent movement in San Francisco arose from a group of parents connected with the Louise Lombard School, then known as Alta Vista. The superintendent of schools in San Francisco at that time had suggested that they might be closing this special school. He had attended a meeting of other superintendents in the state of California who had decided that to admit children with IQs below a certain level into the public school system was not appropriate, that these children belonged in Sonoma State Hospital or one of the institutions for the mentally deficient. We made a group visit to Sonoma State Hospital, and we were appalled at the conditions of the children. The memory of the Holocaust and the camps in Europe were very much in our minds, and we thought, we're not doing much better. We took our complaint as parents to our second district and pointed out our concern and our sorrow that the children would be deprived of this opportunity that they had. The second district supported us eventually and filed a protest with the state PTA. The fact that the situation of the families and the children was brought out into the open for discussion, that new ideas were promoted and implemented. And I think that ARC did a lot to lift the curtain from the convenient out that most people adopted, you know, out of sight, out of mind, you know.
In 1963, 3 women, parents of who had children in the state institutions, went on a tour, visited all the state institutions, and what they saw was horrifying.
I talked to this young reporter from the Orange County Register. He had never seen a state hospital, so we went in when they weren't prepared for us and couldn't cajole us with cups of coffee and sitting around the superintendent's office. The superintendent wasn't there, of course. We found terrible conditions. We found filth in the living quarters of people. People were unbathed, poorly fed, not given any chance to progress or to develop skills of any kind.
Wards were overcrowded. There'd be 100 people living in a ward, one bed right next to the other, no place for personal belongings, very little staff, very little in the way of program. It
shocked this young man. He had never seen anything like this before, and I hadn't seen it before, of course, and was dismayed and disgusted, but it was good for me to see it through the eyes of someone who hadn't seen it before and who was able to write about it. That was the important thing, that he could write about it and did, and that his paper let him write it.
Frightening stuff. I mean, it was right out of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So these were not pretty places. These were not humane places to live. People were stripped of lots of their dignities and then subject to some pretty cruel punishments.
Governor at the time, Pat Brown Sr., was embarrassed by this, as any governor would be, and turned to his Department of Mental Health that ran these institutions and said, what do we do? And so he appointed a committee of 3 members of the State Assembly. And this committee started to look at the issue of state hospitals. And the initial focus was on quality. What could be done to make these large institutions more humane? The families were organized, and when they heard that the governor was proposing to build more institutions, they were very upset.
We're here to speak for justice and humanity, for the legal and moral rights of 500,000 citizens of the state of California, who through no fault nor choice of their own are mentally retarded. Among the most pathetic of this deprived group are almost 13,000 who are eking out a bare existence in our state hospitals. I'm getting mad.
They wanted to have their children at home, close to them. And they wanted services in the community. And that came through loud and clear.
Things just progressed from there, and we finally got around to Lanterman. Frank Lanterman was an interesting man. Among other things, he lived at the Senator Hotel, which was the big hotel in Sacramento in those days. It is no more. When we really wanted to see Frank, we would hang around the lobby around 5 o'clock waiting for him to come home. And when he'd come home, we would just hop in the elevator with him. And so we'd ride up and we'd push the top button so he'd give us longer to ride, you know. And we knew him, so we'd say, Mr. Lanterman, hello, and he would say, hello, Margaret, hello, Vivian, whatever. And so, you know, he was civil to us, but he really didn't want to talk to us, but he had to. We had him trapped in the elevator.
Lanterman was very supportive of the parents. It was the parents who came to him in the first place. It was the parents who wanted those options. It was the parents that wanted programs right in their home communities rather than being on a waiting list to get into state institutions.
And so the legislature moved out into the unknown in its thinking and said, well, what if we utilize the private sector? After all, most services in this country, human services and all other services, are provided through the private sector. What if we rely on the private sector? And if we put money out on the street and say, we have somebody who needs such and such service, maybe somebody out there will respond and provide the service as long as we're able to pay for it. So the first legislation was introduced in 1965, about 2 years after the committee had started its work. And it called for setting up 2 pilot regional centers. And so the state contracted initially with the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles to operate the one down there, and with the ARC San Francisco to operate the one in the Bay Area. And during the first couple of years, these 2 regional centers saw about 500 cases. And lo and behold, they were able to find suitable alternatives in the community for all but 25 of the 500. This new way of providing assistance to people with developmental disabilities was so appealing that the effort to build additional state hospitals was stopped.
Out of this, Frank Lanterman took hold, and he began the process of forming what turned out to be called the Lanterman Act.
That enabling legislation said we are creating this idea as an alternative to moving sons and daughters to large state-run options. From the beginning, the Lanterman Act envisioned that this was going to be a community-based service system that's close to the family, that can provide a full range of services and supports to the family for the whole course of an individual's life. What a great promise, what a great piece of legislation. And now after 40 years, it's only gotten better and stronger. It promises people with developmental disabilities and their families assured long-range planning and services to their sons and daughters.
And Lanterman, who had been a legislator for, I believe, 17 years before his involvement in this became the cause that he championed.
There are still people out there that believe that the best way to deal with people with developmental disabilities are to put them away in a state hospital somewhere and lock them up and get them out of our neighborhood, and that's what we do.
And those of us who have been around a long time remember what it was like when kids didn't get special education, when families didn't get support, and programs. I know when I was a provider, the regional center supported 1/3 of the clients in the program. That was the policy. So there's been tremendous progress in the system.
The numbers of people that were being served today are way beyond anybody's imagination, and the dollars that are involved in serving in the system are way beyond what anybody ever would have imagined.
But there's not just one remedy to serve all people. People with extraordinary behaviors, we have a number of options. All of them are smaller living arrangements. They provide the kind of intimacy and the case management and the assurances of quality that we think we can build confidence in the families and ourselves, because we've already had the experience of some of those accomplishments, but we can continue in these new models.
Well, the Bay Area Housing Project is it's a breakthrough for the state in terms of housing people with developmental disabilities. It's taking them out of a hospital-type environment and moving them into the community.
As well as trying to set up a system where California maintains a stock of housing for future generations.
There are going to be homes that will be dedicated to those individuals who have more independent living type skills, and there will also be homes that will have tremendous amounts of support for individuals who have enduring medical needs. For the first time, we're actually going to be closing a developmental center and not relocating the individuals to another developmental center, but actually putting them in their community.
The closure of the Agnews Developmental Center is a landmark moment in history in California.
As opposed to previous closures of the state developmental centers, this one is being done in a different way.
It's been done very carefully and involved families and focused on what the actual needs of clients are to live in the community.
Many of the new programs are new innovative programs, and some that are being modeled after other states, particularly Kansas, with the family teaching home model.
The family teaching model is a discipline design where you recruit individuals, families, who are willing to devote their life to provide service to people with special needs. In this case, people with developmental disabilities. And to work with them in a model that brought a family home in a duplex situation where the individual would have more free time, their own space, opportunities to accomplish objectives, and also be right next to a family.
I think that this experience, to see the difference that there is here and to see the firsthand all of the changes that take place even the first week is the most rewarding thing.
I guess just the independence. To see in the last, I guess, 6-7 weeks, just the total transformation of their personal time in their room. I mean, it's great. And then to see them have the opportunity to have their own shower, to sit in there for 20 minutes and sit under the shower and let the water just run over their head, and just to watch them enjoy that. You couldn't ask for anything more for them. You feel blessed that you can just see the turnaround. And I always like to tell the parents, because when we did this back in Kansas, give us 6 months, give us a year, and you'll see a different child. And that's all we can. That's all we want to do. We want to turn their lives around.
The additional other group was folks who have ongoing, for the entirety of their life, from their birth all the way to today, physical challenges that once medically stabilized make them fragile to changes, fragile to viruses, fragile to all those things in life that can take you down physically. We have to be aware of that. We have to figure out better ways of serving it. And are we obligated, only in our thinking, to serve them in a larger setting because it's more efficient? We think efficiency is great, but we think you can do that in a smaller setting.
And as the time goes on and we got to know the staff, they were very well, real friendly, and, they cared for her very well. And she seemed happy, and she's got the attention on one-on-one basis and got used to doing things that they normally don't do at the subacute sometimes when she was cared for, like caring for health care, like brushing her teeth or combing her hair. So we're really happy that she's in a good, well-setting home. I think there should be more of this kind of homes to help people that need care and special attention.
I've seen improvements. Part of it is that it's almost a one-on-one for each client. They have more attention and lots of it improvements medically wise, also activity wise. You know, we go outdoors or go to special events, goes to day programs, and they like that.
I think everybody understands that if these models are successful, it will change the system. And I think all parents are looking towards opportunities to have stable housing, to have a better quality assurance system, to have models of service where they feel comfortable that their family member is safe, but also independent and included in the community.
It's unbelievable to me that we've reached 40 years in this system.
And I would like to just say thanks to the regional centers.
Golden Gate Regional Center being one of the pilot regional centers, and the Association Regional Center, they're a member of the Association Regional Center Agency, and ARC San Francisco, congratulations on being on the leading edge.
I think that we are so much better off than we were when this system started, when very few families knew about regional centers. We had to go out looking for people with developmental disabilities and convince families that we did provide an alternative.
It's easy to forget and take for granted what you do have here until you've been to a place that doesn't have anything. And so we are so thankful for any support that anyone gave us, let alone the amount of support that the regional centers gave us when we really needed it most.
When you think of our system, you can't just think of services to our clients. You have to think about families.
And the continuation of the fight will come from the families and the primary consumers themselves, I think, who are much better positioned than ever to articulate what it is that they want.
As time goes on and as the memory, unfortunately, of Frank Lanterman continues to dwindle over time, we need to continue to relight the torch of concern and compassion that he brought, and the founding parents of the Lanterman Act and the wonderful families who established the Golden Gate Regional Center over 40 years ago.
My biggest fear is that the next group of parents won't push as hard as the previous group of parents.
Families oftentimes today rely on that advocacy that was done previously. They really expect that the system is an entitlement that will always be there and is not at risk, but it is very fragile. Without clients, without families who are willing to step forward and advocate and speak their mind and communicate to decision makers in the government, it won't happen.
We have a responsibility not only to our own child, but to the greater good of the whole. And all of us need to dig deep and find what we can do to contribute to make things better. We are a voice for our voiceless children. We're the support for them, for their lives. And we have an obligation, in my view, to get out and fight with everything we have in any way we can for their lives. And that's what it's about.
Sometimes the community can do more than they think they can do. And sometimes we learn from the people that we're doing for what our own abilities and our vision can be. So we can't shut them out. We got to listen to them.
Parents are parents, regardless. You just do what you have to do.
You just have to be ready to fight and make sure that we don't lose any of the great ground that we've gained over the last 40 years.
Clearly, the parents who got the Lanterman Act together and really moved mountains to make that happen has served as a true inspiration to me as a new generation advocate for my son and for others with developmental disabilities. And I'll never forget what they've done, and hopefully the work that we're doing today will inspire others to take up the sword and take up the fight so that we can further the lives of people with developmental disabilities in California.
Happy anniversary to the Regional Center. We hope they'll live a long, long time so they can keep focused on our clients and methods of meeting their needs.